opportunity for middle-class people in middle-income countries. So you have to have connectivity. You need steady electricity. You need to be able to use a computer or at least a phone. So you're middle class. And you're definitely not in the poorest countries who don't have steady electricity or connectivity, and most of the people don't even know how to use a laptop. But for those people, this is an export boom. Because deep down, the comparative advantage of emerging markets is quality-adjusted, low-price labor. And this is an opening of the ability to sell that labor directly into offices and workplaces in the rich countries without leaving home. So it is, and I believe, there'll be many, many more emerging market miracles, and they'll look like India, not China. India is a complicated story. I'm just learning about it, been reading a lot about it, and you can tell me how it happened. What did happen in '91? We could go on for a couple hours there. But in any case, India, in essence, did it on services. China did it on manufacturing. And I do not think manufacturing is a way that anybody else is going to be able to do it. But I think Kenya and South Africa and lots of Nigeria, lots of countries who have relatively talented people who are relatively low price will be able to start exporting, and that will create the dynamic of a dynamic economy. So that's the first thing. The second is we actually have all the international governance we need for this, or most of it. It's called the GATS, the General Agreement on Trade and Services. And unbeknownst to the Quad, remember when the GATT was run by the Quad, US, Canada, Japan, and the EU, they set they set the Uruguay around agenda, and part of that was services. So they got services in, and they got the GATT signed, and they defined the 4 modes. And since back in '94 there was no Quad imports of Mode 1, they liberalized it all. Almost every sector for almost every rich country has no restrictions on Mode 1 trade and services. So when Philippines start exporting services to the United States like crazy, the GATT says the US can't protect that, at least in obvious ways. The second is we've already agreed to a moratorium on digital transmissions, tariffs on digital transmission. So we're not terrifying. And even if you did, how would you ever do that? So in many ways, we have regulatory free trade and a good framework for this stuff. We don't need to sign free trade agreements. And I guess that's one of the reasons why India could come up so fast without having to sign trade agreements with the partners, is because it's basically open anyways. The 2 things that probably do need to be looked at is taxation and labor standards. So I hired somebody on Upwork for this website that I founded called voxeu.org. I hope you've all seen it. Research-based policy analysis and commentary. Can I flash the logo up? But we expanded, and I needed another copy editor. So I went up to Upwork and asked for a copy editor. And we were paying unemployed British journalists in London £25 an hour. And I found a woman who's working in Bangkok, who's a Japanese national, who grew up in the United States, a master's from Columbia, and wants to work for $12 an hour, copy editing. And I managed, us being good social democrats, we raised that salary up to £15 an hour, and whatever. But in any case, how would I have ever found that person before? No way. Upwork. But here's the question about taxation. Let's suppose the journalists in London find out about this, and they think it's outrageous that we're hiring this person because they're not paying taxes in London. But as it turns out, she's not paying taxes in Switzerland either. And my guess is she's not paying taxes in Thailand either. Because one of the reasons she went on Upwork is she didn't have a work permit. So what we have here is a growing rapid replacement of workers who are not paying taxes. And when I was at Davos this year, I met the CEO of Upwork, Stefan Kessel, and I asked him about this sort of thing, and he says, well, we would, and for US-based freelancers, they give a 1099, a miscellaneous income form, for all the US-based freelancers, which essentially informs the US government about that income, or at least potentially. And he says, and if Sri Lanka asked, I would give it to him. But Sri Lanka doesn't ask. And, it's hard, but I think a global treaty, or not, probably just guidelines to start with, that the platform should report the income to the local authorities would be useful. The second is labor standards. So I'm quite sure that we will soon enough have scandals in the globotics telemigration world like we've had in Nike shoes and Champion t-shirts and things like that. We'll find out, and one of the things that's really big right now in telemigration is tagging photos. So you need a great big data set for photos. So like if, let's say you're a retail store and you want a robot to take your inventory for you, you have to take hundreds of thousands of photos, or at least thousands of photos, of all the things, and a human has to say, this is a box of cereal, this is a bottle of peanut butter. And that's done in this world of telemigration. And who knows? Who knows if it's 12-year-old girls chained to chairs in outer Mongolia in freezing conditions. Who knows? You can be a dog on the internet and nobody would know, right? And what's different is that in goods, we have standards because you can go to the factory potentially and see what's going on there. But this internet stuff, you never know who actually did the work. So I think there will be a need for the host government, the local government, to assure the labor standards in these services. And I think actually countries who do that will have an advantage because big companies won't want to outsource to that kind of scandal thing. But I'll stop there. I wish I had left more time for questions. But
well, thank you very much. I'm going to suggest that maybe instead of answering each question as we go along, let's collect 5 questions, and then you can have a composite answer. Perfect. So, first 5 questions. Please raise your hands, and somebody will bring a mic. And yes, the lady over there, and then the lady behind her, and the gentleman over there, and the other gentleman. So that's 4. Okay. I think yes.
Very, very interesting talk. Thank you, Richard. I enjoyed it tremendously. But I was trying to link up a little bit more on this new protectionism, which is what the topic had stated when I got the invitation. This entire concept of data localization, to make sure that whatever data it is, you have brought out about services, you have brought about other things. But I think what this country has is data, and all kinds of data. And this is what a lot of global firms require. But if you localize it, isn't that a kind of protectionism again?
Thanks, that's a good question. Next one, yes, the lady over there. Be brief so that...
Yes, Richard. Richard, my question is that, well, I'm not at all against AI. Rather, I'm pro-AI because it's ought to happen. We can't help it. But 47% of the workforce is expected to be replaced with the advent of AI. So, somebody might have cognitive skills and some might have some social skills or communication skills. So how do you think that the 47% of the workforce who loses their work, how you think with AI, how are they going to be fitted into the system?
Good.
Thank you.
I think I gave out a sequence that I don't remember now, but why don't you? I think there's also a gentleman at the back.
My name is Ajay Mutreja. I've been working on the area of both machine learning and AI for the last 5 years. Before, a lot of what you said is already happening in India. Let's talk about even in the remotest parts of our country.
Can you make it a question?
Sure. My question is, how do you see India jumping in this? Because we are teaching school children in the United States sitting in India. We are reading radiological reports and x-rays in the remotest parts of Kenya, and I've been working on that. How do you see this really going to be taken?
Thanks a lot. Yeah, the lady right behind you.
I'm Dr. Bharti Chibber from University of Delhi, and congratulations on a great presentation here. Yeah. Okay. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to a problem called e-waste management, because you started your presentation with the European Union, and recently in the elections, they had won the Green Group. They had won 62 seats. Earlier, they were less, about 52. So in the context of your robotics, technology, globalization, though I'm pro-globalization, but still, how do you think, what's your take on dealing with the problem of electronic waste, which actually is very hazardous, and internationally we only have one Basel Convention on it, which talks about transboundary movement of waste.
Okay.
And unfortunately after that also we have a
got
problem.
a question, yeah. Two from there, maybe one gentleman, one lady. Keep the gender balance going.
Well, I'm going to add a little humor to it. Do you believe in what Ray Kurzweil said, that you won't be able to distinguish man and machines by the end of this century?
How would generative adversarial networks and recursive convolutional neural networks affect knowledge workers, especially highly skilled knowledge workers? Because with recycled GANs or with recursive CNNs, you cannot figure out how they reach certain decisions, but they're already much better than highly trained radiologists or pathologists or software coders or even telecom network engineers or integrated circuit designers designing integrated circuits.
Thanks very much.
So let me go on the new protectionism. And you put your finger directly on data issues. So I have to say that I've been following the e-commerce stuff and the Indian position and the data restrictions relatively closely, and was involved with the Japanese government during that whole thing. And I don't really know how to think about data yet. So what I want to do is share, and actually that's the Indian ambassador gave an excellent talk. I said, we don't know data, so it's too early to regulate it. And I'm not sure where I come down on that, but in any case, let me share you my confusion. So first of all, data is not one thing. In international commerce, we know how to regulate goods, services, intellectual property rights, capital, and people crossing borders. So which of those is data? Now, some people will have you think that data is like a good, and therefore the freer the better, with some adjustment for the losers. But some people think it's like intellectual property rights, which is you should be able to hold on to it, but move it, but pay for it. So I think we have to develop a more nuanced view of what data is before we regulate it. And I'm quite sure that we will soon have a data mode 1, data mode 2, data mode 3. And then once we have that conceptual things, we'll have a better way to regulate it. And I'm quite sure it won't be either way. So for example, if your DNA is taken, I'm pretty sure that anybody, anytime, anywhere is not the right solution for DNA data, personalized DNA data. At the other extreme, your postal address for delivering a package, I guess that's pretty much no big deal. So I think we have to think harder about what it is, and so I don't think you can be for or against data localization. The only thing I would say is that data localization is you have to know a lot of technique before you start talking about it. So for example, data localization is backed up in the cloud very frequently. So it's not localized. And there's a number of issues. Another one that's kind of fun is data embassies, which is where you can have a server where somebody else's law applies, and the host country promises to respect the laws of whatever it is. Estonia has one of those in Luxembourg right now. AI, let me go to the next one. AI can't help. AI can replace the jobs, you can't stop it. Now, I think it's right that AI can't be stopped. But I think when people throw up their hands and say, therefore we have to let it happen, I think that's also wrong. So nobody in this room really cares about digital technology per se. We care about its impact on humans. And the primary vector for that is jobs. Now, companies adopt technology and employ foreign freelancers in order to save cost, basically to displace people. And every government in the world has laws about firing people, displacing people. So if this thing went crazy, let's suppose this was like the LA riots meets the Yellow Vest meets the Battle for Seattle, and the thing starts spreading and people go crazy, governments could shut it down very quickly by tightening labor market restrictions. If you made it hard to fire people, expensive to fire people, companies would stop adopting the AI at the same pace and teleworkers. Now that would be the nuclear option. There would be tons of fallouts. We'd be suffering for years. It would be like in Southern Europe where they have the two-tier job market. The youth get it in the neck. It's a terrible thing. But to say that we can't control it is just not technically correct. So the Moore's Law is going to keep going, but whether it disrupts jobs or not is our choice. Moreover, there's many, many industries where regulation could be used to slow it down. And in my book, I talk about shelterism, which is, I think, a trend where wherever there is regulation, it will be used to slow it down. Health and safety, environmental protection regulations, labor market regulations will be used to slow down the implementation, just like it's happened with Uber and Airbnb, where regulations slow it down. Machine learning is happening in India. I love that in these kind of talks. I give a talk, half the audience to go, he's just, man, that's science fiction. And then some guy will get up, I work in AI, it's already happening, like you're behind. And I go, thank you very much. Because it's happened so fast, there's a disconnect between what people, especially people who study stuff, and people are actually in companies doing it, is quite different. What's India's advantage? I think India will be a great big winner in this sort of thing. It will have to morph very quickly. And in fact, from what I understand, companies like Infosys are developing RPA to replace Indian outsourced workers in India with software that's employed in say, the United States. Because they realized where this was coming and they leapfrogged themselves. But that doesn't mean that it's going to empty out all the jobs in India, because the channel right now for outsourcing is limited to very few tasks, but I think it will widen enormously. And Indians speak English, you're in a good time zone, you have a base of technology, you have a reputation. So personally, I think it'll do very well. And also on the AI side, I think India is already, people walk off the campus in Delhi, go to Silicon Valley and start being productive workers. So that doesn't happen between many developing countries in industry. So I think there's a technological advantage as well. So this is not the country that has the worst problems, although there will be great big reshuffling. The call center jobs will be replaced by Siri. That's the kind of example. Green issues, I wish I did, but I don't know much about environment, and my daughter hates me because of it. But I can't have anything to say. I think it would help, it would hurt, I'm not sure. Bitcoin's a bad idea, though, I'll give you that much. You won't be able to distinguish men and man. I don't do more than 10 years out because I think that's science fiction. Just for example, people think that quantum, this is again guessing, but quantum computing could be a thing in 10 years. Now, quantum computing changes like the iPhone sort of thing, just completely different. And who knows about transmission speeds, and who knows? So I don't do more than 10 years out, and in 10 years, there are not going to be replacements for this. And if you want to focus on what it is, you need a big structured data set to get a computer to do a human-like thing, and many, many human things can't be put into big structured data sets. Knowledge workers. I think we need more nuance on the word knowledge workers. So some people, knowledge workers, essentially experience-based pattern recognition on things for which we could get a big structured database, and their jobs are toast. They will be soon, if they're not already. But lots of knowledge workers are dealing with unknown situations, or they're being creative, or they're managing or motivating people, or they're applying ethics, developing curiosity, things that are knowledge workers. And if you look at like McKinsey Global Institute's study of the things that are least automatable, it's education and management type jobs, which are certain types of knowledge workers. But other types of knowledge workers will go by the wayside.
Well, that's great. I think we have, do we have any time or no? Three more questions at the bottom.
We've
Well,
already got, we
is
got
that
over
okay?
we got over the hump of the appointments, of the signing in.
So I think the lady sitting in the corner, the gentleman right behind her, and the lady on this side, and I think we'll have to put a limit on that.
So how can India take advantage of the service trade exports, particularly through these mega trade agreements like RCEP?
Thank you. Next one.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin, for your wonderful lecture. But while I was listening to it, and also I think somebody else has also asked you a similar question, I was thinking of the writer Aldous Huxley, the English writer, who predicted a nightmarish future for men being controlled by machines. So AI is, of course, all guided by profits, by companies. But should we have a scenario where, machines replace, control men and also replace jobs? I mean, I don't care if I don't have an iPhone. I'm okay by an ordinary phone. I think instead of, I think we need to focus on the happiness and welfare of humans and other species. So either there should be a ban on all this, which is replacing jobs, which humans can do, or there should be a very, very controlled scenario for all these machines.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, the last one.
What kind of institutional arrangements would be needed to deal with this class of people that are, as you say, they are precarious and what Guy Standing calls as precariat? And who or which country would lead the development of those institutions?
Thank you very much.
So let me be
Richard, it's all yours.
Thank you. Let me be very, very brief. So how can India take advantage? I would just refer to my previous answer. I think India has an advantage and can do. I think the only thing that might be more useful is the realization that service exports are your comparative advantage. And that's the wave of the future. And in fact, manufacturing exports is not the wave of the future, not just for India, not for anybody, unless you're already down that line. And India could hold service fairs like they have goods fairs. There could be a devoted institution which would help foreigners understand what the Indian certificates mean in bookkeeping or accounting or whatever, or what is the value of your things, in essence helping people in the rest of the world buy your services by making it more transparent. I also think it's possible, maybe India is not necessary, but in some of the smaller countries, that the government should have in some sense a TripAdvisor guarantee of quality, so that these guys are good enough. And there's always the question of quality on the internet, and the way it's solved now is through a TripAdvisor sort of thing, so it's chicken and egg. So people can't get in because they don't have a rating, and they can't get a rating because they're not in. And the government could jump over that, in essence, by providing some quality assurance for these guys went through this training, and therefore they'll do a good job tagging your photos. The future, not for profits, not for man, a lot of the stuff you said sounds good. I don't think all of it's very practical. But the one thing I would focus on very directly is controlled. And one thing people have lost track of is the free market will not deal well with robotics. The incentives are completely wrong, and the technology and the data and all that sort of stuff. There's no reason that private sector should have public sector in mind. So I'm not saying you should control everything, but the idea that the market will let it take its course and that's fine, I think that's just crazy. And we've forgotten what we learned in industrial economics about competition and regulatory controls. And this is a classic example of asymmetric information and externalities which lead to a lack of competition. And the idea that we need to control that, I think, has been lost a little bit. So I think people ought to get more in control. It's just crazy. Everybody has a Department of Agriculture, but almost nobody has a Department of AI or data or anything like that. So we don't have a Geneva Convention on digital trade, for instance. That's crazy stuff. Anyways, how to deal with the disruption. Now, in the book, I do almost nothing on policy, and that was partly because I had to get the thing done. The other is because I don't think there's anything that interesting to say about it. So deep down, at one level, this transformation is exactly like the others. A whole bunch of people are going to have to change jobs. Full stop. I'm quite sure eventually there'll be jobs for everybody. I'm quite sure there are jobs we can't even imagine now. Just like, for example, when people started moving out of factories and into offices, we started creating services that were not even imagined in 1970, and you could not have convinced people in 1970 that they desperately needed a web development industry, or drone operators, or that video games would be more expensive than Hollywood movies. Nobody guessed those things because those were services that we didn't even know we needed, but we will need. And I'm quite sure that's true going forward. But those jobs will be what the Globots can't do. So if you want to know what the jobs of the future are, we can't know their names, but we can know their aspects. So if AI can do it well, we won't. And if telemigrants can do it well, we won't. So what's left over is the jobs of the future will be more human. They will involve tasks that require empathy, creativity, innovation, dealing with people, motivating people, educating people. Those sorts of human tasks, the most human tasks, will be at the core of the new jobs. And the new jobs will be very local. Because if you can do it remotely, somebody will be doing it elsewhere remotely. So I think the future of jobs will be very human and very local, and that, in principle, could be a good world as long as we can get from here to there without an absolute upheaval. So to answer the question specifically, is we need more active labor market policy to help people adjust to jobs. And different governments do it in different ways. Some do it better than others. But ultimately, you just have to help change people change jobs. And since it's in the service sector and most of those people are already in cities, it's actually an easier thing than it was before.
Thank you very much, Richard. Well, I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone in the audience, because I certainly speak on my own behalf. This has been a fascinating lecture, and I've learned a lot. And I'm quite sure that everyone there has learned a lot too. The test of it is really that if you offer to come back after dinner and answer questions, you'll have quite a full hall. But since you may have other plans, I think we'll just have to sort of make do with the answers we've got, and maybe follow you on your blog or your website, because I think these questions will keep flowing around us for quite some time. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's very great. Are you saying for that? Yes. Good.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Professor Baldwin, for a truly fantastic talk. And now the dinner. Dinner is on both the sides. So the speakers can move towards my right, and the other people maybe towards the left, so that there's no crowding at one place. Thank you.